Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. Browns players kind of walk through and the general day before a game, day off, getting ready for the Steelers tomorrow. Plenty of news surrounding everything else relative to the Browns. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, on his read with the situation with Kevin Stefanski and the Browns.
Coach of the Year thing. I think we did the Coach of the Year draft last week, right?
We did.
Coach of the Year isn't best Coach of the Year. It's the biggest surprise of the year. Kevin Stefanski has won the biggest surprise of the year twice. It's weird to think that the defending biggest surprise Coach of the Year is embattled, but he is. He is. They are. I don't know what the Haslam's are going to do after the season. I don't know if they're going to keep Kevin Stefanski. I don't know who they're going to blame for this mess, but we know that bad owners don't blame themselves.
With that, let's welcome in Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI. And Spencer, I know you've written a couple articles on the Stefanski situation. You know, Vrabel on the sidelines in New Orleans. Everybody trying to figure out what that means. Kevin Stefanski has downplayed it, but just kind of your whole thoughts on Kevin Stefanski's future.
Yeah, I think the variable thing is interesting. I can understand why, that sort of percolated in people's purview in terms of, or peripheral vision in terms of like, oh, why is this kind of happening? Especially considering at the start of training camp, Vrabel was on the record basically saying like, no, I don't have a role on game day. I'm just kind of more of in a supporting staff position. And then all of a sudden he's showing up at home games. He's traveling to the Saints game this past weekend and he's got an earpiece in and it's like, okay, so what is he actually doing? But I think a lot of that's been overblown to this point. Not to say that when we get deeper in the season, if things keep going awry, that the Haslams won't at least, flirt with the idea in their minds of like, yeah, what if we did pivot to Mike Vrabel? We already got him in the building. But I just don't think, like, Kevin made it pretty clear that the decision to keep him on the sidelines or give him more roles on game day sort of stemmed from them having conversations and, them agreeing that was where he was wanted and needed on a specific day. So I tend to believe Kevin Stefanski when he says that. I don't think this was like an ownership like, oh, we need Mike Vrabel's presence more on the sideline. I think this was kind of just Stefanski going through his process and evaluating and figuring out where he could help more. So I do think that's interesting, though. And the fact that he's in the building and there's starting to be rumors about him being linked to other teams, it makes you wonder if it crosses the Haslam's mind. I do think what Mike Florio said at the end of that clip there about, bad owners don't blame themselves. And listen, I think there's a case to be made that like the Haslams they tried to invest in this team and push it over the limit to be a Super Bowl contender when they made the Deshaun Watson trade. But I think you can also look back on the history of them owning this team and realize that a lot of it's been bad decision-making. And so I think that's probably fair. And I think that's the biggest reason why sitting here today, I would tell you, I don't think Kevin Stefanski is getting fired. I can't say the same necessarily about Andrew Berry. I think he might be in line to sort of be the one who falls on the sword here. And there's some conversation to have off of that. But I think Kevin Stefanski is going to be here next year. But at the same time, if this season continues going the way it's going, I think the Haslams are unpredictable. Like you just never know what they're going to decide to do, when or if they're going to pull the plug. And so it kind of remains this big mystery, dark cloud hanging over the franchise until the season ends.
Yeah. And in fairness to the Haslams, I can't believe I just said that, but earlier in their tenure as ownership, they were pretty impulsive. They poured a lot of money, and again, we're not going to know until years down the line exactly what the Deshaun Watson decision was. If that was the ownership kind of getting involved in it, other than, we'll find a way to pay him, then we got some issues. But again, we'll see. As you might imagine, plenty of people with plenty of opinions on this. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
It is Rico. This hurts my soul as a sports fan watching our Cleveland Browns. I don't want to hear about curses because look at the Lions. They've broken that so-called curse. A sign of a good organization is being consistent, and it looks like they found that consistency. I don't want to fire a coach and a GM every few years. I'm tired of that. I really was hoping to keep those two on board for the next decade. But if the players quit on him, then you can't bring him back. And as far as Andrew Berry goes, I don't know if I trust him making these next crucial draft picks. I think we need a blue-collar, hard-nosed, no-nonsense approach coach. And we have one in the building in Mike Vrabel. I don't know if he's going to be the one to take us over the hump, but I really do think that's who we need. And not only do we have trouble drafting a franchise quarterback, we can't even buy a franchise quarterback. It's just downright awful, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I can't argue with that assessment, and I think Rico's absolutely right. You got to see how the players respond to Kevin Stefanski. Relative to Andrew Berry and a new GM, Spencer, who's going to want to come in with the salary cap situation being like it is? Andrew Berry appears to have a plan where it kind of mitigates it. We'll see. But this team was supposed to contend for an AFC title this year. In my mind, in a lot of people's minds, they're contending for the first pick in the draft. That's not good.
Yeah, and I do think that's why ultimately, like, somebody gets the blame here at the end of the season. And I think your point is really valid. Where if the team quits on Stefanski, maybe it ends up being him, or maybe he becomes part of that equation or part of the changes that they make. I said that a couple of years ago in 2021. People were clamoring for Kevin Stefanski to be fired. And I kind of put it in the hands of like, okay, well, if the players keep playing hard the rest of the season, maybe that, mitigates some of the problems and makes you believe that he can still sort of be here and should be here. And that was the case that year. We'll see how the next 7 games go. 7 games feels like an eternity for this team, given how each week just feels like you're trotting out there to watch the same sort of just miserable experience over and over again. And eventually maybe that boils over and players do quit. But I don't know. I think Kevin Stefanski is still the right. The way I've been putting it is like I still think Kevin Stefanski can be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. When you think about and I think the Andrew Berry part of this is the bigger factor here. Like that the caller said, he doesn't necessarily know if he trusts Andrew Berry to make these key draft picks for the organization, particularly when it comes to maybe selecting a quarterback. And I think there's some validity in that. I think like you look at this roster, we were sort of sold on the idea that this group was going to be really good. They were running it back from last year and they put their stock in that, and they've kicked so much money down the road with some of these guys. And now it's just kind of this albatross and this mess. And somebody I think does get blamed for that. And I think the person that largely you would point at is Andrew Berry. I know there's context as to why some of his picks haven't worked out, but I mean, at the end of the day, like the NFL is a pretty cutthroat business. Like the results need to be there, and you're going to get judged off of, as a GM, especially like the guys that you draft in particular, and then the signings that you make. And some of his biggest signings haven't necessarily worked out. The biggest one, or the biggest trade, I guess, being, Deshaun Watson. And a lot of his draft picks haven't necessarily come to the forefront and been solid players for this team. There's some that certainly stand out in our minds. But there's been a lot of misses in there as well. And I understand like he was drafted in later rounds, but I do think too that when you make the trade you made for Deshaun Watson, you're banking on your staff, like being able to nail a lot of those picks and sort of still be able to sort of mitigate the lack of first and second round picks that you have. And they just haven't been able to do that. So again, maybe it's not totally fair if he gets fully blamed for all this, especially when they continue to say that it's been a team effort and they've all kind of been on the same page with these decisions. But I do think somebody ends up sort of paying the price for this, and it feels more like it's going to fall on Andrew Berry's lap than it would Kevin Stefanski. That's my read on the situation. I could end up being wrong. I also think there's a side of this where if you fire one, what is the point of keeping the other? Because depending on how you hire that next GM, is Kevin Stefanski just going to go into a lame duck season anyway? Now, it's worth noting Stefanski was hired before Berry in 2020, and so he clearly had some say in choosing Andrew Berry to come here, and maybe they would go through that process again and find another good pairing for Stefanski and somebody he can be in lockstep with. But I do think that's another interesting part of this as well is, can they find the right match if Stefanski does stick around, or is it just going to be a guy who comes in and wants to hire his own coach?
So the other thing that happened today, the Browns did rule out Jedrick Wills. He will not play. Jeff Swaim also unable to go has a concussion. So it will be Jermaine Ifedi to get the start at left tackle against the Steelers. And Jedrick Wills, you mentioned Deshaun Watson. Wills is the one pick Barry made in the first round, top 10. That hadn't worked out. So, again, you can point to a lot of things relative to that, swings and misses. Wills has been a miss, and this offensive line has been a mess.
Yeah, and I think this year in particular with Bill Callahan gone, it's drawn even more attention to that group and made you wonder, like, was it more about the picks that Barry was making and the signings he was making, or was it more about the coach that used to be here? Jedrick Wills is certainly going to go down as probably his biggest miss. You have a top 10 pick, only top 10 pick that he's had during his tenure here in Cleveland, and frankly, you blew it. You can look back at that draft and be like, well, they could have taken this guy, they could have taken that guy. I think that becomes kind of like a pointless process in some regard. But yeah, like Jedrick Wills was supposed to be like the knock it out of the park pick, the guy that could sort of be, even if I don't know that he should have been labeled with the expectations of replacing Joe Thomas, because that was never going to be an easy thing to do. But you thought he'd at least come in and sort of hold down the fort there and be somebody that could be at that spot for years to come. And that just hasn't come to fruition. I think this year in particular has sort of signaled that they're ready to move on from him. He won't be back next year. And yeah, like they're going to, Andrew Berry is going to have to kind of wear the fact that he missed on that one big time. And that's the pick that people are going to point to the most and say, for all maybe for some of the guys that you have hit on, there's this one major miss. One of the only times you had a first round pick, and you didn't get this one. And now we're sort of left asking questions about needs for this team, quarterback maybe being chief among them, but also you could have a void to fill at left tackle now, especially now that DeJuan Jones is hurt and you maybe didn't get a full evaluation of him. So yeah, like 4 or 5 years later, they're still going to be looking for that position that Andrew Berry was supposed to get right the first time around in 2020.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as Cleveland Browns on SI, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We will head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back.
I just picked up all the Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs.
They're multiplying.
Yeah, multiplying. With the chance to multiply my prize by 200 times with holiday bonus millions.
No, they're multiplying.
Oh, you're in a daze.
A holidays.
Snap out of it, because even if we don't win instantly, all the holiday games offer a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of the ticket.
Wait, did you say up to 1,000 times?
Sure did.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Cleveland Browns on SI. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys. I was just thinking, I think it's a bad idea to let coaches on the hot seat draft quarterbacks. For instance, Chicago. A coach was on the hot seat when they drafted Justin Fields, and it turned out badly. Now they have a coach on the hot seat. He drafted Caleb Williams, and it's not really turning out well. I think that if the Browns are going to draft a quarterback in the first round, they either need to be firmly behind Kevin Stefanski for the next at least 2 years, or they need to let the new head coach draft a quarterback in the first round, because I think it does a lot of damage to quarterbacks in the first round when they are drafted by a lame duck coach and then the incoming coach might not actually want that quarterback. Just my thoughts, but hopefully we can get a win on Thursday. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Spencer, it's an interesting thought. Without question, the quarterback and the coach are tied together. That could be a bad thing for Kevin Stefanski relative to Deshaun Watson. The Caleb Williams is a little different than the Justin Fields, but I get the point.
Yeah, I was trying to actually look back too. I think the Jets had sort of a similar situation with Todd Bowles being the one who drafted Sam Darnold, and then that didn't obviously pan out, and then they pivoted under Adam Gase to drafting Zach Wilson. Or I guess Zach Wilson actually came in after Gase had already been fired, and that was more of a solid pick. But I do think there's some truth to that being a trend around the league when lame duck coaches or coaches on the hot seat hire or draft a quarterback rather. I also, though, think in the Stefanski's instance, it's interesting because to this point in his tenure, he hasn't really had the chance to pick that quarterback, whether it's in the draft or whether it's out in the free agent market or whatever. I think they continue to say that it was a group effort in sort of recruiting Deshaun Watson to come here, but given how it's panned out, I can't fully imagine that Kevin Stefanski, felt that he was the best fit for his system, especially when he had to change his system. I feel like a lot of that probably was Kevin Stefanski, going along, being a good soldier in the organization that hired him to just kind of, follow along with the plan and try to make it work the best he could, because that's his job as the coach. But I would be fascinated to see Stefanski get a quarterback that he feels like can run his system effectively, that he can develop effectively. Who that is in this class, I guess, kind of remains to be seen. But he hasn't had that opportunity yet, and you wonder if that maybe buys him a little more time if he were to get a rookie quarterback to see if he can really do something with him in the next 2 years. But I think the caller's point is sound that you just never know with coaches who are going into sort of a weird year where there's some potential for them to get fired and the pressure's kind of on. And they got to win immediately. If that quarterback doesn't perform, you're putting a lot of weight in that quarterback playing well and proving you right almost immediately, and that's not always the case in the NFL.
All right, so we know that it will be Jameis Winston, at least for the next couple of games, as quarterback for the Browns. Former NFL offensive lineman Brian Baldinger, film breakdown on what he saw from Jameis Winston against Saints.
Watch this one here to Cedric Tillman. It was just bombs away. One deep shot after another. Didn't connect on all of them. Oh, but they did connect. On this one right here. Jerry Jeudy coming across the middle right here. Here he is, and Jameis Winston rolling out, and Jerry Jeudy takes this one 89 yards to tie the game up 7-7. It was bombs away. I've watched practically every game this year. I haven't seen any game that looked like this one. Jameis, literally just airing it out. He threw for almost 400 yards. Here you go. That shot, one after another. How about to Elijah Moore down the middle right here? They stayed with it. They did a good job of doubling Elijah, but they still took the shot. In fact, they took a lot of shots down the field. In fact, this one ended up in the end zone for a touchdown. These deep shots paid off. There's Elijah on the outside, gets behind the defense. Jameis rolls out, and on the postage stamp, he tagged Elijah Moore right there for a touchdown.
So, Spencer, this is kind of interesting. This is from Jack Duffin. A 3-game sample of the Browns' passing game stretched out over a full season. Most passing yards in a season since 2013. Peyton Manning had that. 3 1,000-yard-plus receivers and a 968-yard tight end. And again, I'm not as caught up in the numbers. What it shows me is the quarterback play was the biggest problem.
Yeah, and I don't remember them taking a lot of deep shots down the field when Deshaun Watson was out there. I also remember when they were taking or running some deeper routes or trying to sort of spread the field a little bit that way, Deshaun wasn't really throwing to those guys. And, we can point to other problems that existed with this offense. I think that's 100% fair. But you can't possibly watch these 3 games with Jameis Winston. And here's the thing, people are going to point to that second game and say, we'll see, Jameis had problems too. The offensive line struggled, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, sure, there's some truth to that. But I also think Jameis has always been sort of a flawed quarterback. We know he's a gunslinger who's going to take some chances. He's going to throw some wild ones that almost get picked off. And he did that both in the Ravens game and again on Sunday against the Saints. It's kind of par for the course with him. But at the same time, the 2 games, the Ravens game and the Saints game, the offense looked like a completely different entity entirely from what we saw earlier this season. I mean, it was remarkable. I think there have been some positive signs, despite the fact that they still only scored 14 points on Sunday. It would have been more had, obviously, Dustin Hopkins been able to knock home a couple field goals that he missed. But there's still some problems. They're not perfect, but the difference between Jameis Winston operating without that perfection in front of him, and everything not being 100% clean on every single play, and Deshaun, who it seems like needs everything to be going perfectly for him to function and for the offense to function properly. It's been like night and day, and I think that's maybe one of the more egregious aspects to what we saw from Deshaun early in the season, what we're seeing from Jameis now, And maybe the biggest indictment on his play with the Browns to this point is just how the other guys that have stepped in around him, even Jacoby Brissett that first year when the Browns were kind of trying to like bridge the gap to get to Deshaun, like he had one of his better years of his career playing in Stefanski's offense. We know Joe Flacco did it last year, and they won 11 games. Deshaun contributed to that win total, but they won 11 games with Flacco really tearing it up down the stretch. And I think we're seeing similar stuff from Jameis. So to me, like that's one of the most telling aspects of why this trade has failed. It's been one of the more telling aspects as to why Deshaun can't possibly come back and be the quarterback here next year. Like there's just too much that needs to be perfect for him to play successfully. It hasn't worked. And like there's no bigger indictment than the fact that guys have come in and run the offense more efficiently than him and had more success with the same Browns pieces and parts that he couldn't do anything with.
Spencer German and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the Steelers-Browns matchup for tomorrow night. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and Cleveland Browns on SI. Ironically, Jameis Winston, who's been in the league 10 years, has not faced the Pittsburgh Steelers yet. He was asked what he sees when he looks at the Steelers on tape.
Again, it starts with that head coach. I got so much respect for him and the man that he is, and like that defense is they're bend but don't break defense, and they're disciplined. They're a sound defense. They don't make mistakes. They're really good. They got 3 premier rushers, 2 on the edge, 1 in the interior. They got a Patrick Queen is playing better than he's played. They got a young corner that's elite. They got a veteran corner that I've seen over the course of my career. He's fast and likes to take chances, and they got a safety that's a ball hawk. So they're stacked on every level. I think the main focus is the Cleveland Browns have to come and play Cleveland Browns' best version of football.
So, Spencer, I guess the question becomes, what do you want to see from the Browns, not only against Pittsburgh, but moving forward to feel better about what's going to be a disappointing year?
Yeah, I think some of that maybe revolves around what we talked about at the end of last segment, seeing the offense can continue to be successful and move the ball up and down the field. It'd be nice if they finish some of those drives with touchdowns, with points, as Jameis alluded to after the Saints game. He said we just got to finish those drives more in the end zone. So I think that maybe could be a step in the right direction towards showing just something with this group. I think another thing we kind of hit on earlier in the show is just guys not quitting, like understanding that you're 2-8, that the season's kind of gone to the wayside at this point, playoffs aren't happening, but that you're still sort of fighting through and playing for the guy next to you, and not just like throwing in the towel on the season because, it hasn't gone your way. And I think that's kind of an important part of this too. I think the obvious thing then is just like, coming out of these games healthy, because you don't want to see Myles Garrett suffer any crazy injuries or anything like that. It's some of these important pieces that you're going to want anchoring your team next year. You want to come out of this thing healthy. But yeah, like it's Thursday, we know that regardless of record, regardless of how a season is going, I mean, you can remember back during the 1-31 era, anytime this team played the Steelers, the chance to beat them was something that this fan base really rallied around. So, tomorrow, hopefully they can put up a good fight, make it interesting. Crazier things have happened, right? They beat the Ravens a couple of weeks ago out of the blue. So maybe they can pull off an upset here. And that would at least be something that would have fans feeling good about this team, because we know that beating the Steelers means just a little bit more in this town. And I mean, heck, I'll take it a step further. Like, you still got 4 division games left. See how you do in those games. See if you can finish strong in the division and sort of build some momentum for next year against those teams that you know so well. And I think that's maybe some of the smaller ancillary goals that this team can kind of focus on in terms of sending people out from a bad season feeling some sort of positivity about what could be coming in the future.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as Cleveland Browns on SI. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Of course, Dave, always a good time. Thanks for having me.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out, 92.3 The Fan. He also writes for Cleveland Browns on SI. Some news with the Guardians. Stephen Vogt did, in fact, win the Manager of the Year in the American League yesterday. Had 27 first-place votes, so all but 3 in that vote. Talked about what it meant to be named Manager of the Year.
I got way more excited when any one of our guys hit a home run than I ever did myself, or a big play or a strikeout. And I think that's the beauty of this role and this job, is that it's not about you. It's about your players, and it's about their successes. You don't get to go out and hit. You don't get to go out and throw a pitch. There's really nothing I can do other than put people into positions to hopefully succeed. And to see our guys go out and have success, those were the high moments. It's when you see someone like Brian Rocchio put together the playoff run that he did after everything he learned through the regular season. It's watching David Fry, who can't throw the ball, and he's coming up with a big hit, big homer. He's putting bunts down in the play. I mean, just so many different high points. Watching Hosey have the season that he did, getting a front row seat to that every night. Those are the rewarding things. It's all about the players.
So Stephen Vogt named American League Manager of the Year in his first season, replacing Terry Francona. Also some news relative to the roster. The Guardians traded Eli Morgan, a pretty effective relief pitcher for the Guardians. Goes to the Cubs for a 20-year-old outfielding prospect. Alfonso Rosario hit 16 home runs, 767 OPS, stole 20 bases in Single A last season. So Eli Morgan traded for an outfielding prospect that looks like he has a little bit of pop in his bat. We'll see how that works out for the Guardians. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we get the Pittsburgh Steelers perspective. Alan Saunders, beat writer for Steelers Now, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
I just picked up all the Ohio Lottery holiday scratch-offs.
They're multiplying.
Yeah, multiplying. With the chance to multiply my prize by 200 times with holiday bonus millions.
No, they're multiplying.
Oh, you're in a daze.
A holidays.
Snap out of it, because even if we don't win instantly, all the holiday games offer a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of the ticket.
Wait, did you say up to 1,000 times?
Sure did.
Browns getting ready for that Thursday night game against the Steelers. The Steelers come to town 8-2 on the year, first place in the AFC North. They beat the Ravens last weekend without scoring a touchdown. Let's welcome in Alan Saunders, Steelers beat writer for Steelers Now. Alan, I mean, the players are similar to what they had last year. The quarterbacks are different. How are the Steelers getting it done against the best teams in the league, really, 8-2 and playing well?
I think they're relying on that defense first and foremost. It's always been pretty good, but I think they've really taken it to another level this year with the depth they've added. They got Patrick Queen from Baltimore, Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson, two really under-the-radar acquisitions, have been great for them. And a couple of young guys, Peyton Wilson and Nick Herbig, were the ones that came up with the big plays against the Ravens last week. Beanie Bishop, he had a couple big interceptions, the rookie free agent, rookie corner. So I think they really added to the depth of the defense now. It's not just about those star players that have always been able to take over a game, but look, they held the Ravens to 16 points. They did it with one coverage sack by TJ Watt, no splash at all from Hayward or Fitzpatrick. It was all 11 guys and then some doing the job. And on offense, they just kind of got competent, right? I mean, they had Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett. None of that was going very well. Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson are not, sexy names, but they are guys that are experienced pros, and they're doing enough. I don't think this offense is a world beater, but when you pair it with that defense, and they've had outstanding special teams this year as well, it's been enough to be a pretty consistent winning recipe for them.
So we saw that you tweeted this out earlier. Steelers have never won a road divisional Thursday night football game. 0-7 all time, 0-5 under Mike Tomlin. Tomlin 2-8 on the road in Thursday night football. And when you think about it, again, the reason that kind of jumps out at me is Tomlin has never had a losing season.
Yeah, there's never been a year where he would, like, most of the time he was the better team in a lot of those games. The one maybe exception to that would have been the infamous now 19 game in Cleveland. But yeah, there's a lot of toe stubbing that's happened on Thursday night football under Tomlin. I don't know if I have a reason for it. I think when you play as physical of a brand of football as the Steelers generally do, it's always going to be tougher for a team like that than someone that's, going to spread it out and play pitch and catch for most of the game. The Steelers are a physical team, and it takes a physical toll on themselves. It's a little harder to play their brand of football and reset on a short week. I think that makes some sense. But there's definitely a little bit, and they've struggled in Cleveland. I think just one win since 2017 in Cleveland, and 3 of those 7 Thursday night games were in Cleveland that Tomlin has lost. So I don't know. It seems like there's just something about this matchup that hasn't necessarily brought out the best in the Steelers as of late.
Well, Russell Wilson, who's playing pretty well, was injured to start the year, so Justin Fields started some games, and the Steelers were winning with Fields. Mike Tomlin decided to switch to Wilson. The results say it was a really good decision. What have you seen from Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I think that was it's kind of crazy to me that Mike Tomlin has never won the NFL Coach of the Year award, considering, it's a regular season award. If you have a quibble with Mike Tomlin's success, it's playoffs. He's one of the best regular season coaches ever, really, and certainly in the time he's been in the league. To me, that was like a Coach of the Year winning type decision. You're sitting there at 4-2, and you say, no, we want this other guy instead. And then you rattle off 4 straight with Russell Wilson after making the change. The passing offense looks so much better. To me, I think Russell Wilson's willingness to just let it loose and throw the ball is what they needed, especially when you have a combat catch guy like George Pickens. He doesn't look open. You just throw it to him anyway. It's always been that from the second week of his rookie year. He made that incredible catch down the sideline in Cleveland, and he's just always been doing that. And I think someone that has the experience to know when it's safe to make a risky play, to just let it loose. I think that's what the Steelers needed. That's what Russell Wilson has provided. And I just think he does all the little things so well, gets guys lined up right, makes sure the offensive line is protecting in the right direction. They've cut down on their pre-snap penalties. I think that those little things are really paying off in a big way for the Steelers as well with Russell Wilson out there. But it's been, there were a lot of Steelers fans that were not okay with that decision. It's been pretty fun to watch people come around on deciding to go with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, you bring up George Pickens, and George Pickens' production seemed to take off exactly when Russell Wilson became the quarterback.
Yeah, he's now up to 4th in the league in receiving yards. He's always had that talent. I think it's been about having someone that can consistently get him the ball, even when he's the focal point of the defense. Baltimore double covered him almost the entire game. Still comes away with 8 catches for 89 yards. There were games in the past where you would see, like with Kenny Pickett last year, where if he was double covered, he would just never look that direction. Like, there was no attempt to try to fit the ball into a star playmaker despite a lot of coverage. And I think Russell Wilson's experience gives him the edge, and kind of knowing when it's okay to take that risk, how to find ways to get the ball to George even when there's a lot of attention on him. And I think Arthur Smith deserves some credit too. The rest of the Steelers wide receivers aren't scaring anyone, and he's still finding ways to scheme George Pickens open. But it's definitely taken another level with Russell Wilson throwing the ball.
Also seems like Najee Harris has kind of had a little bit of a rebirth under Arthur Smith, at least from afar. What have you seen from Harris in this Arthur Smith offense?
I'm not sure how much it's Arthur Smith and how much is the offensive line has been run blocking so much better. Najee Harris has always been a guy where he's big, he's physical, he runs to contact, he runs through contact. If you can he's like a train, like you got to get him going those first couple yards, and then he's really hard to stop. You see the highlights of him running against linebackers and defensive backs, and the stiff arm and hurdling and running through contact, and all that's great. But if there's a guy in his face 1 yard in the backfield, he doesn't do very well. And I think they spent a lot of draft capital in their offensive line over the last 2 years. They've got two rookies and a second-year guy playing from center to right tackle, and Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, Broderick Jones. And those guys have their warts in pass protection, but they are a tough bunch when it comes to run blocking. They really just took it to the Ravens, physically finishing guys on the ground after the play. And I think that's exactly what Najee Harris has needed that he hasn't had in his time in Pittsburgh so far to really make him a consistent high producer at the running back position.
So defense with T.J. Watt, it's really good. You always expect that from Pittsburgh. Turnover margin is plus 11. So that's Russell Wilson and Justin Fields haven't turned the ball over. Defense is turning the ball over. And T.J. Watt looks like he's pretty pissed off that he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year last year.
Yeah, I asked TJ about that this week. If he put any extra consideration into it's going to be him and Miles on the same field. Obviously, they don't play against each other, but with the whole league watching, not just the people that vote on the awards, but everybody else. And of course, TJ didn't take the bait. Just said, it's the Steelers versus the Browns, and I really hope we win. But I do think that he felt like he deserved to win the Defensive Player of the Year award last year. And he's been getting all kinds of attention this year in terms of 2 and 3 players. And I assume, even though Conklin is an old vet and a very capable player, that the Browns are going to have to give him some help. And that may be tough. Look out for the guy on the other side. Nick Herbig is filling in for Alex Highsmith, who's going to miss this game. But with DeJuan Jones out and Wills out, I think he could be the one that actually makes the bigger impact if you spend too much of your time focused on T.J. Watt. Even with Highsmith out, they have a really nice two-pronged attack there, and he was the one that made the big plays against Baltimore, stripped Derrick Henry, and absolutely destroyed the 2-point conversion in the final minute that gave the Steelers a victory.
So weather is expected to be upper 30s, low 40s, some rain, maybe some snow, some sleet. When you look at this game, what are going to be the keys for the Steelers to come away with a win?
This is not any surprise if you're familiar at all with the history of the Steelers and the Browns. I think you could have given these keys for about every game played between the teams since 1950. Run the ball, stop the run, and don't turn it over. You mentioned the turnover margin. Steelers have been a little leakier than they wanted to the last couple of weeks. They still haven't been turning it over a lot, but 2 in the red zone over the last 2 weeks. Arthur Smith said that has his attention. Nick Chubb, I thought, looked the best he's looked so far against New Orleans. Over 6 yards a carry in his last 2 games against the Steelers. Obviously going to be highly motivated after the injury against Pittsburgh. You can't let him get hot. He can take over a game. And then, you're not going to want to throw the ball 30 times in the rain, in the mud, in the crowd noise that they're expecting in Cleveland. I think they got to be able to run the ball consistently, especially on first down, to keep themselves on schedule and extend drives. That's been a really big key for them as well. So nothing groundbreaking in terms of what they need to do. I think, like I said, it's always the case in these games, but it should be. And I'm looking forward to another battle in the weather, man. It just feels like AFC North football. Disappointed that the new building in Cleveland might have a dome. I really enjoy these type of games.
Alan Saunders from Steelers Now, Steelers beat reporter. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Alan Saunders, he is a Steelers beat reporter for Steelers Now, telling us what the Steelers have been doing well, has them off to that 8-2 start as they get ready to come to Cleveland tomorrow. We're going to turn our attention to the Cavaliers' first loss of the season, now 15-1. Sam Amico from HoopsWire.com and I will talk about the Cavs when Sports4CLE continues. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Cavs went into Boston yesterday, ended up losing their first game of the season by 3 points. Fell behind big at half. David Dennis, senior writer for Anscape, with his biggest takeaway of the Cavs' first loss of the season to the Celtics.
My biggest takeaway is that the gap between these two teams is not as large as it seemed, at the beginning of the season, definitely when Boston was up by 20 midway through that game. This is going to be a dogfight between these two teams in the East throughout the season and in the playoffs. You look at that barrage of threes that the Celtics had. Even when they was shooting about 70% from three in the first half, they still ended up shooting better than 50%. When they have games like that, they blow teams out. They did that to the Knicks in the first game of the season. They won by 23. But the Cavs came back and hung in there with Donovan Mitchell scoring 35 points. And they did all of this while missing 4 key players, Wade, Strus, LeVert, Okoro, which would help defensively. I think that if you're Cleveland, even though you lost this game, even though your streak is over, you still feel like you can hang with a Boston team that is firing on all cylinders from 3, which is something you have to feel good about.
With that, let's welcome in Sam Amico, HoopsWire.com, co-host of Full Court Cleveland. Sam, I couldn't agree with the guy more. That's exactly what the takeaway is. They didn't have Porzingis. Cavs are more equipped to deal with Porzingis than most teams because of Mobley and Allen. And the Cavs didn't have 4 of their starters. They could have folded it up. They find a way to make in-game adjustments. At least they have for 16 games of the season with Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah, that game was better than some of their wins. The way they battled back, and sometimes you just got to tip your cap to the other guy. With the Celtics, they were not missing threes at all in the first half. The Cavs made some adjustments there. When they got down by 21, it looked like it was going to be blowout city. But as the Cavs have done all season, when they were trailing by 17 in Milwaukee, they were down in some other games. 9 in Chicago late in the third quarter. They just keep at it. They keep battling. They stick to their principles, and they ramped up the defense. Boston started missing from beyond the arc. All of those things added up, and you feel like if the Cavs have had another 2 or 3 minutes, maybe they would have pulled that out. So, very promising in terms of what they showed the defending champs on their floor. And he was right. The Celtics were missing Kristaps Porzingis. Cavs, of course, missing Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Dean Wade, 3 guys who started small forward for them. Not to mention, obviously, Max Strus. So, we'll see different variations of these teams when they play again. And guess what? They play again December 1st, 4 games from now in Cleveland. So we'll get another look at it. But, yeah, I think the Cavs showed a lot of positive things despite suffering their first loss barely in 16 games.
All right, so the other thing that keeps hopping up, third quarters, and that's the adjustment quarter. Cavs scored 40 points in the third quarter yesterday, 5th time this season, recording 40-plus in a single quarter. They were down 21, 79-58. They closed out the period on a 30-14 run to pull within 5. The other thing that they showed a lot, there's like a mental toughness that you can't teach, and it's probably because they've played together.
Yeah, familiarity has really helped them out quite a bit, it seems like, when it comes to trusting each other, moving the basketball, and finding guys like George Niang under the basket with a defender on him and still giving him the ball. And guess what? He's more often than not been delivering. So I think there's been a lot of positive things in terms of cohesion, chemistry, fight. We've seen all those things. You don't win 15 games in a row without those things. You don't give the Boston Celtics, you don't make them sweat out what was once a 21-point lead on the road without, a real belief in each other and determination. So I think that familiarity was a good thing, but I also think that having Kenny Atkinson be able to bring that out in them has really taken them, to the place where they are now in terms of not just belief in each other, but their efficiency and their ability to, as we saw Tuesday against Boston, their ability to battle back.
So I know you wrote an article that Kenny Atkinson took some of the blame after the loss against Celtics. He said it was the game plan too.
Yeah, and maybe it was. A good coach never really lets his players take the blame. Look, Darius Garland had a nightmare of a night, 3 of 21, played okay otherwise, just could not get the ball to drop. And Boston's guards were unbelievably physical with him. And that's something that he's going to have to adjust to before the playoffs. But guess what? There's, 66 games to go before the playoffs. So there's time for that. And he's a huge reason that Garland is that they're 15-0 or started 15-0 before that loss. So, if you're the coach, you look at it and say, they were getting all these 3-pointers, which really wasn't a big deal. I thought the Cavs were challenging a lot of those threes pretty well. Some of them came from 30 feet. Peyton Pritchard was hitting them almost at half court. Sometimes, again, you just have to tip your cap to the other guy. But give Atkinson credit, because after halftime, we saw that third quarter, which is normally where the Cavs struggle this season, has been the third quarter. And Kenny Atkinson has said, we need to fix that before the end of the season. And against the Boston Celtics on their own court, missing some guys, you managed to fix that. So, yeah, he's going to take the blame, but look, you're going to lose a game. This is the NBA. That's just the way it goes. And, if you're the coach, you probably think we should go 82-0. So when you don't, you kind of shoulder the blame, and that's what Kenny Atkinson did.
You mentioned Garland, and again, Darius has shot the ball so well. Guys are going to have bad shooting nights, but you survive a night where you don't have 4 guys that you expect to be in the rotation, and you're, 2 or 3 score, depending on how you stay, going 3 at 21, and you're right in it to the end. What's the big takeaway from the Cavs in your mind?
Well, it's because they're getting contributions, I would think, from guys like Ty Jerome, who nobody knew what to expect from entering the season. He's been huge. George Niang has raised his game to another level this year. You saw Craig Porter Jr. come in, had a magnificent night, 15 points, did a good job defensively. They're just getting contributions from everywhere. And a big part of that really is the system that, they've been put in a position to succeed. And Kenny Atkinson will talk a lot about, he talks a lot about shot quality, say we're getting good looks at the basket, and most of the time we're knocking them down. Now, the Celtics, as any good team would do, they have the two best defensive guards in the NBA, and Drew Holiday and Derek White together, very physical. And any good team knows, let's take out the head of the snake, which is the point guard, which in this case was Darius Garland. And they wanted to disrupt everything that Garland was doing. And for a while it really worked. But eventually, because of the Cavs system and their belief in each other and moving the ball, that you had guys like Ty Jerome, George Niang, Craig Porter Jr. Sam Merrill only scored 6 points on 2 threes, but 2 of those threes both of them came during that big run in the third quarter. So they just have guys that have been able to step up and deliver. We always hear the whole next man up thing in sports, and it's probably a little annoying. but the Cavs have been getting them. The next guy who has been replacing someone who's injured has been stepping up, and that's been the case all 16 games.
Sam Amico from hoopswire.com, as well as co-host of Full Court Cleveland, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll continue talking Cavs, go a little bit bigger picture with the Cavs. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Cavs with Sam Amico from hoopswire.com and Full Court Cleveland. So the question becomes, the Cavs off to a 15-1 start. Are they legitimate, serious title contenders? ESPN's Stephen A. Smith and the First Take crew address that question.
I think they're a worthy title contender. I think that when you look at them right now at 15-0, when you look at Kenny Atkinson and the job that he is doing, and I think that David Aldridge wrote an outstanding column on him and his transitioning from being an assistant coach in Golden State under Steve Kerr to what he's brought to the Cleveland Cavaliers organization was a great column, no doubt. Give him props. But in the same breath, I also think that getting the ball in the hands more of Evan Mobley, who's shooting better from three-point range than he has in the past, who's averaging more points per game than he has at about 18 a game, taking nearly 13 shots a game. Garland and Donovan Mitchell are averaging about 46 points a game combined. But here's what I'm looking at right here, guys. The Cleveland Cavaliers are number one in points per game, offensive efficiency, field goal percentage shooting, and three-point percentage shooting. And they've got about 6 different dudes averaging double digits. Also, only 2 of their players are averaging 30 minutes per game. And one of them is Donovan Mitchell, of course. 10 players are playing at least 17 minutes per game. So you're talking about cats having fresh legs. They've got athleticism. They defend. They can shoot the basketball. And, oh, by the way, in case y'all missed it, Donovan Mitchell can ball.
And, Sam, the consensus is Cavs and Celtics are right there, and it's hard to argue with it. You know, if someone wants to dislike the Cavs, it's going to be Stephen A. Smith. And you just heard what he thought about him.
Yeah, and that's all accurate. I mean, he rattled off a bunch of numbers and a bunch of stats, and those things are all true. The great thing is through this win streak, as Donovan Mitchell and Kenny Atkinson and Darius Garland, all of them have said, we're still learning. We're still figuring things out. It's always nice to do that when you're also winning. Some of the, we always say there's no losing, there's only wins and lessons. Well, the Cavs have been winning and having lessons, and I think that's been very beneficial. Look, in terms of the wins and losses, that's been magnificent, but it's really about how the Cavs have been playing and the style and the system. As Stephen A. said, they're not running guys into the ground minutes-wise. They're still defending very well for 90% of these games. And offensively, they've been a juggernaut, So all of these things, if you just stay the course, you're going to be able to go places. And, look, all the Cavs after the game against Boston said, to us, we showed that we're right there and we can beat anybody, anywhere, anytime, as we've always thought. So, Evan Mobley came out and said, I think we're probably, to me, the way we came back shows that we're, if not the best team, then close to it. So I just think that more than anything, it's really, all those things adding up. System, players raising their games to another level. And as Stephen A. said, Evan Mobley went from being a pretty good power forward to a guy who is getting a lot more touches and has been a lot more efficient offensively this year.
All right, so this is also from ESPN.com. It's power rankings after last night. Cavs still number 1. Warriors 2, Celtics 3. Cleveland's undefeated start ended in Boston on Tuesday. Celtics were plus 36 in three-point scoring differential. Still the Cavs, after notching their 15th win November 17th in LeBron James' last 4 seasons with the franchise. Quickest Cleveland reached 15 wins was November 30th. Gives you a little bit of perspective. And again, Sam, we know championships aren't won in November and December. But, man, we were worried about all kinds of things with the core 4. And Kenny Atkinson kind of said, I have a plan, and plan looks pretty good so far.
Yeah, I mean, opposed to, or forget the game against the Celtics, Darius Garland has taken his game to another level, and again has been a massive reason that they went 15-0, and it's been off to this start. He had a clunker of a game in terms of shooting the basketball, but it's going to happen. This is the NBA. There's 82 games, and I guarantee you one thing: he'll have another. And guess what? So will Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. I mean, it's just the way the NBA season goes. But, to me, yeah, there was nothing to me that said the Cavs are still not the best team in the NBA just because they lost the game. They lost on the defending champions' home floor by 3 points and really dominated that second half. So I think that there's so much, like you said, Dave, no titles are won this time of year, but there's just so much momentum to build off of. And that's really all teams are looking for. When you're talking about the start of the season being quote unquote meaningless, it's really not, because these races in both conferences are going to probably be so tight that giving yourself the kind of cushion the Cavs have given is that probably going to help them a heck of a lot at the end of the year when these Eastern Conference races are so tight.
All right, so this from the Bleacher Report. Again, buying or selling NBA teams' hot starts. Cavs, they're buying it. Cavs are deep, balanced, well-organized, and studded with stars. You have to go out of your way to nitpick any part of their scorching start. Again, Sam, you can't argue with it. They're getting 10. Craig Porter came off the bench when they needed it. Everybody that is needed to is ready when they are needed. And that's a sign of a well-coached and a team that understands what their coach is asking of them.
Right. I mean, it is nitpicky. If you say anything back, okay, Darius Garland had a bad game. There's the one thing you could say about the Cavs that, you could say, okay, there's the one flaw in the entire season. Darius Garland had a bad game, and as you said, Dave, they still almost pulled that out against the defending champs on their home floor. So it really has been way more than not only anyone expected, but I'm wondering if the Cavs themselves are a little surprised by this start. Jared Allen talked about that the other day, and he said it is a little surprising, but I also thought coming into the year, the way we were humming in training camp and the preseason, he said with the way that we felt connected, it's not all that surprising. And he said, I think we're capable of this type of start, and now we're proving it. He said, but it's special, and it's something that guys don't want to give up. They love this winning feeling, this connectivity with each other, and playing this way. And that's the good news is not only Kenny Atkinson bring in a new style, from his days with the Warriors, and they're playing pretty much the same style as the Warriors do. It's working, and it's flourishing. And when you have that, and you have buy-in from your superstars and Mitchell and Garland and Mobley and Allen, when you have buy-in from those guys, if this continues, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, you can really go places.
All right, before I let you go, Cavs back-to-back tonight, so they play the Pelicans, and 9 players are out for the Pelicans, including 8 of the 9 leading scorers. Cavs will also be without 6 players against the Pelicans tonight, including Darius Garland, ruled out with groin soreness, LeVert, Merrill, Strus, Dean Wade, and Okoro also out. So, again, you hope the sore legs from Darius Garland, you hope it's not one of the reasons, but it could explain, you get those leg issues, that shooting, but it's going to be a lot. The good news is Cavs are deeper than most teams, so the 6 guys out isn't going to hurt them as much as the 9 that are going to be out for the Pelicans.
Yeah, and you know what, Chris Fedor obviously does a great job, and since he's tweeted that out, the Pelicans have lost another guy, so they'll actually be without 10 guys. I don't know how they're fielding a team. Poor David Griffin right now. I've never seen that, NBA injuries are commonplace. The Pelicans have just been totally wiped out right now, and it's almost a shame. They're 4-11 entering the night, so it's not been good for them, and they played last night as well, so got blown out by Dallas. As far as the Cavs go, Sam Merrill out. He missed 3 games. He had to come back and start in Boston with a sore ankle, so they're resting him again tonight. He's got to sit out because his ankle's still bothering him. Darius Garland, I think, just took a beating against the Celtics. I don't think it's anything serious or majorly to be concerned with, but given the circumstances, the Cavs laid it all on the line against Boston. I thought even if they had everybody, how are they going to get through this game tonight? Because, they went all out in the second half there and really made a charge. So, look, they're going to be big favorites, and you just have to take care of business. You still have 3 of your big guns in Mobley and Allen and obviously Donovan Mitchell. You don't have much of the bench because now the bench is going to have to be starting. I think we'll probably see a little bit of rookie Jalen Tyson, probably see a lot of Craig Porter Jr., Ty Jerome, George Niang. Kenny Atkinson went with 8 guys against the Celtics, may only go with 7 against the Pelicans. That said, Pelicans may only have to be able to go 6. So it's just one of those nights in the NBA. The good news for the Cavs is 3 days without a game after this one, get time to kind of restore themselves, and then, have conceivably an easy one Sunday against the Raptors at home.
Sam Amico, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, make sure you check him out. Really good Cavs coverage. Hoopswire.com also covers the NBA, and he is the co-host of Full Court Cleveland. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.